Seder Zorim teaches us about the Mitzvot HaTluyot Ba'aretz. Someone cynical could see that the varied Mitzvot HaTluyot Ba'aretz are similar to the varied form of taxation that every country tries to get more and more of our wealth. However, the reality is, if we look closely at each of the Mitzvot HaTluyot Ba'aretz, we'll see that each has its own meaning and significance, and some of them have nothing to do about giving. In fact, as we'll see today, some of them have to do about getting. We'll begin by today's topic, which is Mitzvat Bekorim, the bringing of the first fruits to the Beit HaMikdash. We'll start our discussion not with the Mishnah, but with the Psukim in the Torah that tell us about Mitzvat Bekorim. Now, the placement of Parshat Bekorim in the Torah is very significant. Parshat Bekorim shows up almost at the end of the Torah, at the end of Sefer Dvarim. And if we look at the Torah as a book, it would be a real exciting action novel. There's always a feeling that right around the corner we're getting to the dramatic end. The promises are about to be fulfilled, but then somehow something happens, and again we've returned to a long journey, and there are ups and there are downs, but like every good story, and we hope that every good Jewish story, there's a happy ending. And the end of the Torah tells us the happy ending. And in many ways, Parshat Bekorim is telling us what the happy ending of the story of the Torah. The Bekorim appears in Parshat Ki Tavo, and it tells us what will happen when you come to the land. At the beginning of the Parsha, Vaya Ki Tavo la'aretz, asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha nachala, v'yirashta v'yeshavta ba. You'll come to the land that you've inherited. You'll dwell there. You'll inherit it. V'lekachta mereshit kol pri adama asher tavi martzacha, asher Hashem Elokecha noten lech, v'samta betaneh v'alachta lamakom asher yevchar Hashem Elokecha l'shachkein shemo sham. You'll arrive at the land. You'll inherit it. You'll bring your first fruits. You'll go to the place chosen by God. And the parsha continues by bringing the first fruits and telling the story about what we went through and how ultimately we've achieved the fulfillment of the different promises. And in the happy ending, V'samachta b'kol hatov asher natan lecha Hashem Elokecha ulebeitecha ata v'alevi v'ager asher b'tzerecha. And it ends by telling us that we'll be filled with joy with all the good that God has given us. Now, within the Parsha, much more than this paragraph sounding like legal legislation, telling us a requirement we have, it's much more giving us a descriptive account of what's it going to be like when you ultimately come to Eretz Yisrael. And I think this gets to the heart of Mitzvat Bekorim. There's much less a aspect of legislation, a form of taxation, but much more of a way for us to experience and express to ourselves, to others, and to God that the promises have been fulfilled. And the way we do that is through the Bekorim. And in fact, if we went through, the Parsha starts with a series of verbs. It begins with Tavo, you will come, v'lekachta, you will take, v'yirashta, v'yeshavta, v'lekachta. We have a bunch of verbs. Some of them are descriptive of what's going to be, but it's not clear when do we stop describing what will be when you get to the Eretz, and when do we start giving legislation of what you have to do. And I think part of the point is that the Bekorim themselves are part of the description, part of the happy ending to this story. And what could highlight that point, the word natan, netina, giving, shows up many times in these psukim that I've read. However, none of the times the word giving, noten, is used is talking about us giving to God. We're giving of the Bekorim. The word noten, giving, is exclusively used in these psukim to talk about God giving to us. Ki tavo la'aretz asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha nachala. Tevi ma'artzecha asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha. We came to the land asher nishba Hashem Elokecha latet lanu. And the point, and we could highlight this by seeing that in the following mitzvah of Maaser, there it does use the word netina to describe us giving the Maaser. So here it's very deliberate that netina, giving, is not descriptive of us relating to God, but rather God giving to us. But the giving of God is expressed through our bringing the first fruits to the Beit HaMikdash. Now, if we read the psukim and raise the question, when are the Bikurim brought to the Mikdash? One could read the Parshiot and say that this is a one-time action done in history. When we ultimately arrive to the land of Israel, then we'll take our first fruits, we'll go to the Beit HaMikdash and announce that the promises have been fulfilled. And having done that, presumably, we don't have to ever do that again. We've fulfilled this this commandment. We've arrived. We've achieved it. However, if this would be left as a one-time phenomena, what the Bikurim try to tell us about who we are and what's happening in our lives, we'd other than that one generation, we'd miss out the ability to get that appreciation of what we have. And I think it's similar to what we know about people who make aliyah, are often very appreciative of the fact that we are zochet to come back to Eretz Yisrael, whereas those who have been born in Israel often are much less appreciative, and they take things much more for granted. And therefore one challenge in life is not to take things for granted. That excitement that takes place when we enter the land and the promises are fulfilled, how to take that excitement and appreciation and continue that year in and year out. In fact, this paragraph of what's said when the Bikurim are brought is the basis of the Haggadah of Pesach, because part of the Mikra Bikurim is telling the story about how we left Egypt. And in that context, the person bringing the Bikurim expresses himself in first person. And that's the source of the principle Chayav Adam Lir'ot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim, that a person has to feel that he himself is living in that dramatic generation of those who left Mitzrayim, because that's the only way you could really appreciate it. Now let's turn to the Mishnah and see the ways of the Mishnah that these ideas are expressed within the Mishnah itself. If we'll begin with the first Mishnah of the third parak, Ketzad mafrishim et habikurim. Yored adam letoch sadeo, v'roeh te'ina shebikra, eshkol shebiker, rimon shebiker, koshro begemi vomer, harei elu bikurim. The Mishnah tells us that the bikurim are the first fruits that have grown, and the time that we designate them is when they're still, at that moment that we first experience them and meet them. It tells us it by telling a story. The same Mishnah could be told using very legal language, but rather it's told as a story. Somebody goes out into his field. It's just like every day, but today is different because today he sees that the perot of bikra, the first blossoming of the fruit itself. And here there's another opinion in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Omer Afal Pikein Chozer v'Korei Otam Bikurim Ma'achar Shitleshu Min HaKarka. The issue here is, when are things designated as Bikurim? Do you designate them after they've been removed from the ground, and that would have them similar to other mitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz that achieve their status once they've left the ground? Or is the formative moment, that moment that you go out and discover the hitchatshut, the renewal of the year, by seeing the first fruits of the new year? Now, a lot of the Mishnah continues by telling us the story of how the Bikurim were brought to Yerushalayim. And thereto it's very indicative of what the Bikurim are all about. The Mishnah asks, the second Mishnah asks, Ketzad malim et Bikurim. Kol hayarot sheba mamad mitkansot li'ir shel mamad. All the cities around that particular mamad, that group that was connected to the Korban Tamid. V'lanin berachova shel ir v'lo nechtasim lebatim. They're so filled with emotion that they're going to bring the Bikurim. They're not even entering the houses. They're sleeping in the streets. They're getting together. Ulamashkimim haya amuna omer kumu v'nalet Zion el Hashem Elokeinu. Let's come up and go up to Zion, to God. And there's a fascinating wordplay in this Mishnah, because in many ways what we're arguing is what Bikurim are all about. The fruit is not what's important. What's important is the person bringing the fruit. What's important is the person bringing his fruit about what he wants to tell or discover about his life. So the Bikurim going up to Yerushalayim, the main point is the person who's going up to Yerushalayim. And there's a word play in the Mishnah. The Mishnah begins by saying, Ketzad ma'alin et Bikurim. How do we raise up the Bikurim? We use the word of aliyah, going up, but the end of the Mishnah uses the words, Kumu v'na'aleh Zion. Let us go up. So the word of aliyah, for the Bikurim, ultimately, the word aliyah is used for the person, the people themselves who are bringing the Bikurim. The Mishnah continues, Mishnah Gimel, and tells about the ceremony of the Bikurim. Skip to the third line. Vashur holech lefnehem. There was an ox going in front of them. V'karnav mitzupot zahav v'tara shel zayit b'rosho. Hachalil makeh lefnehem. Ad shemigim karov l'Yerushalayim. There's an entire procession of an ox with gold-plated horns, musical instruments. They come to Yerushalayim, shalchu lefnehem v'yitru bikurim, and they start decorating the Bikurim. Again, the Bikurim, but there's such a stress on the whole ceremony and excitement surrounding them. And suddenly they get close to Yerushalayim, and what happens? Hapachot hasganim v'gizberim yotzim lekratam. The most important people in Yerushalayim go out to greet the people bringing the Bikurim. Lefi kavod hanichnasim hayu yotzim. And according to the kavod of those who are nichnas, and Yerushalmi explains, means according to the number of people they would go out. V'chol balei umanayot b'Yerushalayim omdim lefneihem v'sholim b'shlomam. And everybody, all the professionals, the craftsmen, stop whatever they're doing and ask b'shlomam of those who bring the Bikurim. Achenu anshe makom ploni, batam l'shalom. Come in peace. And you think about it, we know society is often based, you have the elite, and certainly the Kohanim are part of the elite. You have the craftsmen that are maybe a second level in terms of the wealth, and then you have the people living in outside the city, and they're generally the people on the bottom of the ladder. And here you can imagine the country bumpkins coming with all their fruit to Yerushalayim, and they come to this big city, and they see the wealth and the splendor of Yerushalayim, and they feel, how little they are. And suddenly, everything's reversed. They're coming there, and suddenly they're empowered, and the most important people are coming out and to respect them. And they're bringing their little fruits to Yerushalayim. Somehow, they're treated differently than maybe their self-perception, and they're allowed to look at themselves differently to see how they're not all the way on the bottom, but rather they're all the way on the top. We'll learn one more Mishnah relating to the Bikurim. Hachalil makeh lefneihem ad shemigim lahar bayit. The musical instruments in the procession continues till they get to Har Bayit. Hagiu lahar bayit afilu Agrippus hamelech. Even if the king was there, notel asal ketefo v'nechnas. He has to put the basket on his shoulder and enter. And again, I think this is the whole point of the Bikurim. What you're bringing in front of God to demonstrate, it's not the fruits, it's you. You're bringing yourself in front of God. And the fruits are, in that context, to allow you to express what's happening, the blessings in your life. And then we'll end this part by the continuation says, Higiu lazara v'dibru alavim bashir. And when the people at the Bikurim come, the Levim break out in song, and what do they sing? Arumim Hashem kidilitani v'losimach ta'vili. What they choose to sing about is a pasuk talking about God raising us up. Of Perak and Tilim talking about David talking about God raising him up. Again, Bikurim is about who we are, what we've achieved, and Aromimcha, being raised up. And in that way I see the connection between the Bikurim and Chag HaShavuot. We know that Pesach is the holiday that focuses very much on the past. And that's why we need 7 days filled with all sorts of symbols from a lost world of the past to experience the past. Sukkot, in many ways, is connected to the future. The ideal situation in the future, the closeness to nature and God in an Eden-like world that we will get to in Achirit Hayamim, in the end of days. But Shavuot is about the present. Chag HaShavuot is our ability. There are no special symbols or mitzvot, because it's about being able to look at life as it is and feel the blessings of life. And that's why Shavuot is about Zman Matan Toratenu. And that's why Shavuot is a time that we begin bringing our Bikurim. Because so often, although we know how important it is to be Mitzapeh Yeshua, so often you ask someone how they're doing, they'll say in Hebrew, Yeh Tov. And, it'll be good. But part of Hakarat HaTov to Kadosh Baruch Hu is be able to be Sameach in the good that we already have in our lives. And in Shavuot, and Bikurim, and in Torah, we are directed to look right now and see and rejoice in the blessings we have. And maybe I'll end by connecting to the idea of Sfirat Omer, counting the days till Chag HaShavuot. That we know the count, we don't count from 1 and get to 50, or we don't count from 50 and get to 1 to try to overcome time, but rather we count going up. Every day has significance that we add to the previous day. The days, we're not trying to overcome the days and get somewhere, but we're trying to appreciate each day itself. And that's why in Kabbalah there's a special meaning to each of the days of the Omer. And I'll end with a quote of the late Rav David Zeller, who said about Sfirat Omer, the way to count the days is by making the days count.